Welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B Growth Guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Mark Scrimenti. Now, Mark is a seasoned operations executive, fractional COO, and certified system and soul coach who helps founder-led companies simplify complexity and achieve consistent, profitable growth. Drawing from his experience scaling an e-commerce company from under 50 million to over 150 million in revenue, Mark applies product strategy principles to business operations, treating the business itself as a product to design, optimize, and scale. Through his company, Vivid Path, he helps professional services and SaaS companies align their people, processes, and culture while building scalable, productized service models that reflect their values and deliver long-term impact. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation, and we've had a chance to catch up on some topics. But before we dive in on some of those topics, why don't you kind of give our audience your story? Tell us a little bit about, what you've done in your career and how that led you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I've been a fractional COO and a strategic operations coach for the last 5 years. And before that, I was in e-commerce. So I led operations and customer experience for an online retailer of music gear. We built all of our software in-house. We did all of our digital marketing in-house. We did everything in-house pretty much. And we saw a lot of growth during that time. That was the under 50 million to over 150 million in growth. So that's really where I got into operations, building teams. It was DIY at first. You're the first Scrum Master. You're writing clinic requirements. You're writing copy, and you're doing content strategy and so forth. And then you build a team. You find people for whom this is their calling, this is their passion, and they're really good at it. They're better than you are, and you hire them. You build a team around it. So we had our own product team. We had our own, engineering team, data science. We're strong in data science, which is great in e-commerce because you got a lot of data to work with. So we did a lot of modeling that was really essential to our growth, and but we had a call center as well. And before that, I had my own marketing agency. For about 4 or 5 years, I was doing, most of the work myself. It was, small businesses, digital copywriting, website development. I learned to code. Before that, I was at a startup. I was at an early AI startup, like in 1998, 1999. The tech was very different back then. It was similar concept, but not, just nowhere near the power and scale and speed. So there's a lot of manual effort involved in indexing things, but it was a cool technology based on natural language parsing technology based on something developed for NASA that allowed astronauts to talk to robots on the space shuttle. Just, fly out there to the left wing and check the aileron, or not that one, but the other one, that for a robot to understand language in context like that is very difficult. Nowadays, with where we're at, it's far different. But anyway, so that's kind of my career, in a nutshell. And been in tech the whole time, and really operations kind of where it all came together. The cross functionality of it, coming from sort of a general background with lots of different perspectives, and then the building aspect of it, the growth aspect of it, and then quite honestly, amplifying impact. I think that's what I'm doing now in working with small to mid-sized businesses, B2B, professional services, SaaS, and e-commerce. It's helping them really clarify their vision and realize their vision, develop a strategy around it, build a team around that, and then really amplify the impact that they can make, leveraging the power of business to make a positive difference in the world.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
that's my purpose.
Well, and so as a fractional chief operating officer and system and soul coach, not everyone listening may be as familiar with system and soul as they might be with the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, or other ways of sort of running a small business. Talk to us a little bit. What is systems? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, good question. So you mentioned EOS. It's a business operating system, and it's a way for small to mid-sized businesses to have a real management framework for running a business, and it really distills the wisdom and best practices from businesses for decades. And System and Soul spun out of EOS because one of the founders, was an expert EOS implementer and one of the first 5 implementers, a Gino Wickman protege. Gino Wickman is the guy who wrote the book on which EOS is based. And he felt that after a few years, people tended to outgrow EOS. Some of his best clients outgrew it. It wasn't as dynamic. It was kind of static in the tool set, and could be a little bit rigid for some people. And it didn't say enough about people and culture. And I think that's the main piece. And so like with System and Soul, attempts to redress that imbalance or what's missing there by certainly honoring and building on the process strengths of EOS, structures, systems, processes, metrics, cadences, all those things are really important. But on the other side, it's people, and it's vision and values. It's aligning. It's a growth mindset and understanding that if you're going to grow as a company, your people also have to grow with you, or else you're going to outgrow them. Or if you're not growing, they may outgrow you. So how do you do that in parallel? So in System and Soul, for example, people have a personal roadmap and it's a career roadmap, and you're trying to align that with your strategic roadmap. Like, how can we grow together for as long as possible? And, so leadership development, employee development, all the aspects of culture, difficult conversations, radical candor. System Soul has a lot of tools and partnerships. It's also open source and dynamic, so it's changing all the time, adding new tools. Coaches are adding tools. I have my own tools, and share them with other coaches and vice versa. So that's what System and Soul is, and I'm working with founders and their leadership teams to implement this framework. It's more of a coaching facilitation engagement typically, as opposed to a fractional CEO engagement where you're doing the execution as well. Sometimes it's a combination of both. I mean, and if a client is using EOS already and they're having success with it, I've worked with EOS multiple times, and I can work within that framework. If they're not using a framework, or if they're open to a new framework, I will introduce System and Soul because I just think it gives us more options and it's more flexible.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple times in there culture, and that soul component of that name seems to certainly sort of lend itself to that idea of culture. And it's been said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right. Peter Franklin.
The phrase, what it means is the best strategy in the world can be dominated by a company with a better culture. And I know that System and Soul, a lot of people struggle to say, well, what is culture? How do you build a culture within an organization? And I think there's a lot of ambiguity around even how to define it. But I know System and Soul has a very succinct and really concrete definition. Talk to us a little bit about how do you define culture within an organization?
Right. Culture is really the combination of core values, clearly defined, distinctive, meaningful core values, and organizational habits equals culture. It's really that simple equation, values plus organizational habits, which bring them to life, bring the core values to life to create the kind of culture you want. So we usually look at when we're trying to define a cultural attributes, we start with questions like, well, your best employees, what would you like them to say about you on Glassdoor, for example? And what are some of the adjectives they might use to describe? It's a collaborative culture. It's creative. We're committed to challenge each other in growth, whatever that may be. You're starting there. Let's identify, and some of this is going to be existing. These are our existing strengths. Typically when I'm working with a client, this is what we're already good at. And you look at some of your best people too, and you look at some of their characteristics, and you abstract those into the culture too. Like, we want more of those people. So what do they have, that we want to build on? And then we'll go back to the core values, and by the way, some of them are existing, some of them may be aspirational. It's like we're not quite this yet, but we know we want to be this, and maybe we need to be this. And so we need more of this. So you'll define that. Then you go to core values and you look, well, what do you have if you have anything? We'll define them. It needs to be more than mere table stakes, not just hardworking is good, and it's not everybody's hardworking, so that can be a core value. But some of the better core values that I've seen are phrased as statements like, everybody makes the coffee. That's a core value. It's like, well, you kind of know what that means. Whether you're the CEO or the summer intern, you drink the last cup, you make the next pot of coffee, and that says something about how we work together as a team. And then org habits are kind of in between that. It's so it'd be how do you bring these to life? I mean, everything that everyone makes a coffee could be sort of an org habit, but it's more like they could be rituals that you do together. They can be practices or methods. In System and Soul itself, we do DAT. It's an acronym. It's define, align, and take action. So when we're problem solving, we're trying to really define what is the problem. You ask the 5 whys or whatever you need to get to the core issue. And then you're trying to summarize that in a sentence. And then you're trying to align that with your strategic goals, your objectives and key results, especially for the quarter, but even beyond that. And then take action. Okay. So if this thing doesn't really align with your objectives, maybe it's not something we should be talking about right now, or maybe it's not a priority. Maybe it goes back on the backlog, so to speak. And if it is, let's take action. And can we make a decision now that will move us forward today? Or what's the next step? And let's make sure we do that. So, those are some examples.
And that makes a lot of sense on why culture like that is so powerful versus strategy, because sometimes a strategy can kind of sit in a box,
right?
Or sit in a folder on someone's desk. If you don't have the culture that makes that strategy really actionable, to where those daily habits are, acting on those values to implement within the organization, it's a big difference.
Right. I think to maybe give another example that would be make it clear would be, for example, if you want to be a data-driven organization, there's a lot of technical implications to that. You have to have the infrastructure. You need to be able to test at scale and so forth. You need analysis and data scientists and for example. But you also need it's a certain mindset. It's a growth mindset. It's a willingness. It's a commitment to learning, to continuous learning, to testing out our ideas, not just advocating for what we want, but actually being willing to put our ideas to test. And sometimes they don't win. And then that's okay. Or being able to take risks and make mistakes, like that's okay as long as you take responsibility from them and you learn from them. Like these are cultural attributes that, any organization that wants to grow, stay competitive, and really, I think nowadays more than ever, stay ahead of the curve and the competition, needs to be willing to test things out and adapt. That adaptability is so key, and you can't really do that without a commitment to learning and changing and growth. And so these are all cultural attributes, and you need to develop practices and operationalize them to bring them to life.
Yeah. Well, so that gets on that systems part, that
Yeah.
operationalizing those practices. And you and I are
Right.
both big fans of systems and processes. And one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past, and that I think would be interesting for our audience, is you're seeing a trend similar to me, that a lot of services businesses are building processes that productize their solutions. And then, with this proliferation of software and technology, there's actually the opportunity to create software that underpins the services that
Mhm.
they provide and makes those services more valuable to the customer. So the customer is willing to pay more, and also create some continuity between maybe tentpole engagements. And
Mhm.
the simple example that I like to use a lot is, the accounting person that used to come in once a year and would clean up the books, or maybe once a quarter and clean up the books and pay your taxes, and then go away. It
Right.
was always a painful experience because you hadn't done a good job of keeping your, sort of your books in order or your receipts together and all those things. And so the next time that accountant shows up, they go, "Hey, good news. I've developed a little piece of software for you that's going to suck in all this information from all your different credit cards and banking accounts. And then it's going to be nice and painless the next time we meet. And it's going to cost you, $20 a month." And so now that accountant has made themselves stickier, because once you get that set up, you're not likely to leave because they have made it so much easier. They've also given themselves some recurring cash flow because they get a few clients paying that $20 a month. It starts to add up. And they've improved the value of their service to you, all through doing something very simple that, potentially be coded in, a quarter, if not a month.
Right.
Just a little bit of investment. Talk to us about, some of the ways that you're seeing companies either bring in new technologies. You mentioned AI early on, but whether it's new technologies like that or just maybe, old boring technologies, but just taking that mindset shift and going from, we're a services company that comes in and does an engagement, to we're a services company that leverages software to improve the experience for our customers and then creates these ongoing relationships.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's the ideal. It reminds me of, Michael Gerber, the E-Myth Revisited, where he talks
Yeah.
about, you got to think like a franchise in order to scale, even if you're not a franchise. And the whole idea there is standardization, which you should be doing anyway, whether you're, planning to franchise or not, because that's how you scale. You need standard process, repeatable processes, modularized, templatized, and so forth. And so this is a challenge for a lot of service-oriented businesses. I've worked with a lot of service-oriented businesses that are treating every engagement almost as if they're starting from scratch, and they're wasting time, they're missing opportunities that way, they're less profitable as a result. So, it all starts with standardization, and there's beneath that, you need to have, consistency across your tech stack, data structured data that, that's aligned and consistent, throughout the tech stack, flowing and, in alignment. So those are all some fundamental pieces, but in terms of, what you're talking about, productizing services, creating recurring revenue is a big part of that, as you said. Finding the things that you're doing all the time, and these are typically high volume processes that can be automated, and doing that. And so whether it ends up being, so I work with clients, for example, a design agency, and we're always looking for ways to create bigger service solutions packages, and recurring revenue. Most agencies, I work with a lot of creative services agencies, they end up getting projects. They get project work. That's they're in with a client, but they're not necessarily retaining you want to retain these clients long term, and you want to engage them and expand. You want account penetration, account expansion, and if you're not more systematized, you miss out on those opportunities. And, one thing that people tend to miss is they're having every conversation they have with a client, they have an opportunity to gain strategic insight that they can build on for that client, so they can be in a position to, if the project goes well, the initial project, expand the options for that client. You've proven your value, and at the same time, you're learning what would be most useful and helpful. And there may be some strategic components to that as well as tactical, and you're building on that over time, and you're making sure that they're aware of these opportunities and that you can deliver them. This is sort of like on the way to productizing services, in terms of using technology. Like AI is everywhere and is essential to this process, and it's wonderful because it really accelerates what you can do in this regard. When it comes to standardizing processes, for example, you can, really just, you can crawl a body of data, whether it's, your email inbox or something, and really have it figure out what are some, structures here, what are some repeating patterns or solutions, common solutions to common problems that we're seeing. And just let's flesh out an outline that way. And then you can, it's so easy to automate these things, or to build software, for example, or an agent that will do them for you now. And so, my clients I'm moving all my clients in that direction if they're not already there. I'm working with a legal accelerator. Everything is doing back office, agentic AI automation. So, intake, starting from intake to using like N8N, which is a native AI automation platform. It's like a no-code solution, where you can just create these flowcharts that, it's like, that move workflows along automatically from system to system. So, and some of these things, if they're robust enough and common enough, you can then start to package. And if it's not software as a service per se, it's like, well, I've got an out of the box solution for that. So the more, that you can think like a product, as opposed to a service, the better. So, it's kind of, that's the parallel with just think like you're a product company. And that's a tough switch, because it's for services, that means there's a change in mindset. There's investment involved. You may not see an immediate return on some of this work. You may need to spend a little money to make money in this regard, but I think it's absolutely the way to go, and it's certainly the way to scale.
Okay. Well, and you talked about that mindset, which is, a lot of services businesses are in the mindset of yes, and like,
right,
whatever the client says, yes, and like they'll do whatever the client asks, even if they know it's maybe not the best thing for the client to do.
Right.
Or if they know it's not where they are in their zone of genius, where they're not their best. And so they just always say yes to everything, which is one of those real obstacles to productizing things.
Right.
And then the other thing that you hit on that's worth sort of noting is this idea of sort of modularization. And I've seen companies that are, really expert service providers that provide a very consultative service, but in the process of listening to their clients to understand their clients' needs, they're able to say they need one of module A, and they need one of module B, one of module F, but version 2. And they have standardized their delivery, but they're very consultative in listening for what the client wants. And then they come back with what sounds like the most customized solution on earth, but it's actually just a blending of ingredients. It's like Taco Bell. It's the same beans, rice, and meat, cheese that, off the line that makes it 100 different, things that feels very custom. But the idea that they've modularized it first, which enables them to do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the primary work of productizing, I think, is standardizing those things that you do. Deliverables, processes.
and then having the guts to say no when it's
Right.
something that you can do or not something that you can do efficiently or not something that you're going to do better than someone else.
Yeah, that's like the strategy discipline. That's that sort of define, align, try. That's the align piece. Like, does this align with where we want to go? Because it might be tempting and it might be short-term cash, but it's going to distract you from where you need to go and what we've committed to doing, and you need to make that hard decision.
Someone said once, and I can't remember who, the strategy is what you choose not to do.
Yeah.
And it's sort of saying yes to everything is not a strategy.
Right.
Where you define the edges of what you won't do, that really defines that strategy.
And to me, that starts with a strategic roadmap, and that's another thing that I do with System and Soul. It may be a starting point, but it's a one-page strategic roadmap where you're really defining the playing field that you want to that you're playing in. That may be obvious, like if you're in marketing, but sometimes you need to niche. And then what differentiates you within that playing space? So really, who are you? Your identity, and then what are you trying to accomplish? Longer term, like what's your big, hairy, audacious goal? By when? We want to be the number one. Call for top 500 CEOs when it comes to marketing or something like that by 2035, or we want to be a $10 million company or a $50 million company. But and then why? Like because that's the purpose piece. That really is what drives people, inspires them, motivates them. Like what's the impact that we're looking to make beyond profitability? What's the human impact? What makes us? What gives meaning to our work? We're going to be the best at this, and we're going to make people's lives better in this way because this is what we care about. That kind of thing. And then objectives and key results, like breaking that down. Okay, if you want to be there here in 10 years, like 3 years, 1 year, and this quarter, what are your top priorities, initiatives for working on the business versus working in the business? To reference Michael Gerber again. Because that is another thing. People get stuck in the weeds of the day-to-day operation, and they're not carving out time to build the capability for scale. And that's what we focus on. It doesn't happen without that deliberate focus.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you're obviously an expert in a lot of really interesting areas, and we could talk all day, but I got to be mindful of your time. But before I let you go, so the work that you do is, fractional COO and with System and Soul coaching, like who do you work with and what are the types of problems you help them solve? Give us the pitch a little bit.
Yeah. I work with founder CEOs of B2B professional services, SaaS and e-commerce companies, law offices, creative services companies, marketing agencies, SEO, brand strategy. I've worked with manufacturing as well. And I'm helping them to build smart, adaptable systems and healthy growth cultures at scale. So, we talked about the cultural component of growth and scale, as well as the systems piece. I'm typically $5 to $50 million in revenue is an ideal spot. I've gone lower, like 2, and certainly worked with bigger companies, and minimum of probably 20 people, could be 10, on the low end, 20 to 250 or more. And these are founder-led businesses. They've got a leadership team in place. They're probably missing a few pieces. They may or may not know that, or they might have some of the right people in the wrong seats, or they may not have defined the seats yet. So there's usually an organizational design component of what I do, but really trying to align their org structure with their business model, figuring out again what that business model is and optimizing it, and also looking for opportunities for innovation and building in some of the systems and processes for innovation. And then really helping them execute. So either that's on the as a fractional CEO where I'm people may be reporting to me and I'm responsible for executing the strategy as well as developing it, or teaching the team how to do it themselves. That's more the facilitation model. For example, as a system and soul coach, where I'm implementing the framework and meeting with them. I've done it. It can be full day sessions, could be 6 or 7 sessions a year with, plenty of interaction in between, or I can split those into smaller pieces. I've done that. I've done it completely remotely, over with 2-hour, 12 2-hour sessions, just to get it up and running. So it's very flexible and adaptable in that respect.
Awesome. And what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
I'd say LinkedIn. Just my name, Mark Scrimenti, on LinkedIn, and or my website. It's vividpathconsulting.com. You can reach me there, and there's a contact me form there. So I do free consultations. I'm happy to talk to anybody who might be interested in learning more and seeing if I can help them.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Mark. It's been really nice to talk with you.
Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.